I'll start off. I'm down in Baja at our campus this week, so I'm not suffering. I am loving it down here. It's beautiful weather, and it's a nice break from Vancouver this time of year, which is a little bit gloomy. So who we got? Oh, we got some Napas, we got some Bostons. We got a. Is that that wasn't filling the? Oh yeah, we got UK. Good. So they're winning the furthest away. Deep Cove, North Vancouver. Ha ha. That's I'm on the other end of the North Shore from where you are. Yeah, brilliant. North Dakota. It's funny. I was out for a hike here and I saw it wasn't North Dakota, but oddly enough, I've seen numerous license plates down in Pescadero from South Dakota. So I don't know what's going on there.
That's an upgrade.
Yeah. Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and no offense to the people from South Dakota. I'm just talking weather-wise.
Well,
Yeah.
oh, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
upgrade from where I am right now too. So Seattle, excellent. All right. Good, good. Well, let's jump in here and get started. And look, this is a little bit off the track of our usual sort of live sessions, but it's one that I was really excited to do. And um, the reason why is as MEA dips more into the physiological side of aging and the longevity space, movement turns out is a big piece of longevity, and as is community, as is all of these different levers that we have. But movement, community are big things, and a big part of my community and a big part of my movement has been cycling all my life. I remember, I mean, I'm a Gen X, bicycles were our keys to freedom when we were kids. And and I have been a cyclist ever since. I was that kid that would disappear and on my God, my department store bike in, high school and disappear for days. Sometimes my parents were like, where did he go? And then through my life, cycling has always played a role. And one of the things that I find absolutely a lot of things I find beautiful about cycling. One is it's accessible. And I think it's accessible to just about everybody because it's a low impact sport. It's something that you can do kind of anywhere as well. No matter where you live. I mean, I live on the North Shore of Vancouver, so no matter what, I'm riding up a damn hill, which is okay because I do love the hills. But in addition to the movement, it takes me to beautiful places. It allows me to get out in nature. It allows me to see things at a slower pace than I would in a car. It allows me to also have community. One of the things that I've learned about the cycling community is it's probably one of the most welcoming kind of communities out there, whether it's mountain biking or road biking. It's something people do in group and they do in community or in Peloton, which is, I guess, another word for community. Um, and it's a beautiful thing. And so, as we age, and get into midlife, looking for things that plug us into community. And as well, I want to say community outside of work, community outside of jobs. Because a lot of people go, oh, I have community through work. That's not the community I'm talking about. And, a lot of people do find, especially in midlife, building community is difficult. But in every bloody city around the world, you can find a group of cyclists to get out with and to hang out with. And it doesn't really matter what your level is, you will find a group that is there for them. And so as we age and we're looking for community, we're looking for activity, we're looking for ways to get out in nature. I can't think of a much better sport, honestly, than cycling. And yes, I am biased. But again, it's been a big part of my life. It's big part of my family's life. In fact, when I met my wife in my mid-20s, she was not a cyclist. She is now a cyclist. All of my kids have grown up on bikes, and it's been a big part of our life. And so when one of these gentlemen, who I'll introduce in a moment, reached out to me and said, "Hey, I think, this is something that the MEA community may be interested in." I went, You're absolutely right. And so we're going to dive into this, and I want to introduce our guests here that we have on this. And our first guest is actually, he co-founded Cyclefit in London. And he has spent 2 decades working with riders from the Tour de France to weekend cyclists. And he's also seen what happens when the midlife body gets pushed a little bit, gets pushed hard. And on top of that, he's written a book called The Midlife Cyclist. And I mean, it couldn't be a more fitting title for MEA and what we are. And he has a new book coming out this summer called The Cycling Addiction that digs into the psychology of why we ride. And I'm super interested in this because I've always been drawn to riding and I want to understand why. So we got to ask those questions as well. And so first, I'd like to introduce Phil Cavell. Phil, thank you so much for being here. And the person that pulled all of this together, this is another guy. He walked away from a career in Silicon Valley to pursue a healthier lifestyle, and it was guided in part by Chip and our philosophy here at MEA. And when he left Silicon Valley, he moved to cycling, and now he designs tours throughout Napa Valley and beyond, and is just advocating to make cycling safer and more accessible. So we're going to jump in, and I would like to introduce Gerardo Capiel. Gerardo, welcome.
Thanks, Derek. Pleasure to be here. Everything you said so resonates with me about starting to cycle as a kid and really just, it being an escape. And then I live in San Francisco and we're so lucky that we can just ride across the bridge and be right in nature with coyotes and deer and bobcats and all kinds of fun things to see. And what I love is that it's a sport that I've been able to carry into, I'm about to turn 58 and I'm a better cyclist than I was when I was 25.
Mm,
And what the data shows is that unlike running,
mm,
you maintain more of your cycling fitness at 55 than you do your running fitness. So it's you're about 91% of your cycling fitness is maintained that you had at 25, which is incredible. And running is like 86. So,
wow.
anyways, lots. We'll be
Well,
covering lots of good data, but the real data guy is Phil here. So.
yes, and Phil, you're coming to us from where in the UK are you?
Yes, so good evening or good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. I'm speaking to you from the Chilterns, which is a range of hills 30 miles west of London.
Mm,
And it's actually a beautiful area. I can show you actually out my window. So there's the view out of my window
Oh wow.
there. And then if we go around here, I need to be careful not to trip over my dog who's joined us. And then you'll see that this is one of the hills here, and then there's the River Thames down there, which runs through into London. So I'm speaking to you from the heart of the Chilterns, which is a lovely range of hills.
love it, love it,
Yeah.
and I
What,
love
what, was,
this.
what was the question? Sorry.
I think that was the question. You just answered it.
Oh,
So.
okay. Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Well done. All right, so let's
Thank
dig
you.
into this. And Phil, let's start with Phil. Okay, we're going to start with Phil. And let's start with the big why. Why is cycling? I mean, we have options. There's running, there's all sorts of sports, right? Why is it such a powerful tool for people in midlife and even older? Um, and what are the benefits that maybe we're not appreciating?
Yeah. I think your opening statement was very comprehensive, Derek. So I'm going to try and wiggle around in the spaces that you left. But essentially, cycling is good because you can. And so much, if you're a really brilliant sportsman in college or school, and whatever your sport was, football or squash or baseball, eventually all those things fade away.
Yeah.
They just do. You have a family and you get distracted and your job becomes important, and then you get to the other side of that, and actually it doesn't feel right picking up a baseball bat or putting on your pads and playing American football or running or squash. So eventually you end up with cycling. Now, for me, I started with cycling because I was one of the people that came to cycling a different way. I wasn't very good at anything else. I was a dreadful sports person. I mean, if you threw a ball at me, I would drop it. I couldn't catch or throw or run or anything, which was an embarrassment because I came from a family of sports people. My sister was an Olympic gymnast, or in the Olympic squad at least. My dad was a very good gymnast, and it was a wonderment to everybody who met me. How can you have the same parents? This person is a sports prodigy, and you are completely uncoordinated. But all of that changed when I put my uncoordinated, discombobulated body on a bike. Something happened miraculous. I would settle, I would mentally and physically comport myself and settle. I would coordinate my thoughts. The cycling became this magical machine that allowed me to coordinate movement and coordinate thought. And I realized that from a very, very, very young age, that I was a dreadfully locomoted human being unless I was on a bike. Put me on a bike, and I would feel this sense of peace. It's spiritual peace, intellectual peace, physical peace. And so the Victorians, when they invented this contraption, they had me in mind. And it's just, and so the bike and I have been in love since that time. And wherever I am, I present dreadfully outside of every environment until you see me or till you meet me or talk to me on a bike. And then I'm in a very good place. And I want you to be in a good, very place beside me. And so all of those things mean that I can exercise on a bike. I can meet people on a bike. I can talk on a bike. I can create a social group on a bike. Life on a bike for me is actually much more natural than life off the bike. And that's always been the case when I was racing. And then after racing, I became a recreational cyclist. It's just a very, very natural environment. And I think that isn't just my story. In the research for the second book, Recycling Addiction, I met dozens and dozens of people for whom this was the case. Some of them won Tour de France stages, some of them wore Tour de France yellow jerseys. But this was their story too. It wasn't just my story. The bike was their savior in a way. It allowed them to, as you said, I think, Derek, escape, put distance between whatever was frightening them or worrying them or disturbing them in a metaphorical and a literal way. And I think for some of us, the bike is that. But as Gerardo said, you can then take that kind of magical space machine and you can take it into your oldest self. I have a client who broke the Guinness Book of Records, world records, for having done the most miles through his lifetime. And I think he eventually did almost 1 million miles on his bike. Unfortunately, he's died now. But yeah, and he was extraordinary. Here's a man who lived his life on his bike.
Wow.
I'm not saying we should all do that, but it's possible. There's not many 85-year-old runners. There's an awful lot of 85-year-old cyclists.
Yeah.
And they enjoy every single part of cycling that I enjoy and you enjoy. They enjoy the adventure and the escape and the fresh air and the mental stillness and the physical, everything they enjoy, we enjoy. And in that way, what I think about cycling, I'm going to shut up in a minute, is this universal leveler. It's a philosophical, cultural leveler. We're all the same on a bike. Whether you're a CEO of a blue chip company or you're somebody that you clean the streets for a living, you get on the bike, it doesn't matter. It's a complete democratic blanket. So I love it for all those reasons and a million more. Yes. I'm not sure what the question was now.
No, that was beautiful.
Well, and let me add real quick that there's actually science behind this flow state that Phil kind of described a lot about, and it's actually that in zone 2, it's actually when you're in that moderate effort stage, you trigger what are called endocannabinoids. I can never pronounce that correct, but basically they're similar endorphins, but there's a big difference that they actually can penetrate the blood-brain barrier. So that feeling lasts a lot longer than it does with endorphins. So there's science to why we all feel that way.
Mm. Well, actually, let's dig into that. I mean, the cognitive benefits of cycling. There are there's science behind this, and let's dig in. How is this impacting our brains? And Gerardo, why don't you kick it off, and then we'll move over to Phil.
Yeah, I'll let Phil kind of touch some of the more kind of hard facts, more physiological facts. But Derek, you talked about kind of the social nature of cycling. I mean, you do it with friends. It's easy to find, and I'll talk about this later, a cycling club that are people like you. Maybe they're hardcore, maybe they're not hardcore. They like to have fun. They like to be serious. Doesn't matter. You're going to find that club. And that social nature of cycling is gonna, I mean, everyone talks about it, but the high level of social engagement is basically one of the top predictors of cognitive health. So that's really, really good. And I think there's that cognitive reset is also super important. But I'll let Phil kind of hit because he's got some fascinating science that I didn't know before I read his book.
Okay, yeah. I mean, everything you say is true, Gerardo. I think a couple of things that I would add is that there was this whole fallacy and this assumption that you could never grow brain cells, you could only kill them. So, that whole thing when your parents would nag you, don't bang your head against anything because all the brain cells die, they're gone forever. It's all a nightmare. That appears to be, it's not the case. And there's a substance called BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which means that our brains are neurally plastic. And one of the best ways to catalyze that neuroplasticity is, in fact, exercise. And cycling is a particularly good exercise at catalyzing BDNF release. Now, BDNF is only released in slow wave sleep, which brings you to the other side of the seesaw. So, and something that Gerardo and I have been talking about is that I like to think about exercise as a pharmaceutical dose. And I know that might sound controversial. I don't mean it controversially, but what you're doing is deliberately adding a stressor into the body to provoke a different response, like you're taking a drug to get rid of your headache or to fight an infection. And so if you think about exercise being a dose, a wondrous pharmaceutical dose, because exercise is the greatest drug that the pharmaceutical companies never invented. What you also want to do is create the legacy or the long tail where the dividend of that drug is delivered. And with exercise, the dividend is delivered in slow wave sleep. So you're going to get growth hormone release and BDNF release if you enter into slow wave sleep. But if you exercise so hard, so strenuously, so often that you don't actually go into these deep sleep mechanisms, you won't get those benefits. So you actually have to balance the exercise dose with now deliberately creating the environment where those benefits can be received. And that's nutrition, recovery, and essentially sleep, because sleep is the gold standard high performance provider. And so you need to make sure that that's controlled. And creating that brilliant environment for sleep is a little bit more complex when you get to my age at 64 than it is at 26. And so it's actually thinking about that. I'm going to dose my body now with this exercise stimulus, and now I'm going to make sure that I get all the dividends that are owed to me by creating this environment for slow wave sleep. And cycling is a particularly good mechanism for this, and it's shown to be. So we are neurally plastic. Cycling is not only are we enjoying it in the moment, but it's actually making us more intelligent as well as fitter.
And
what's not to like?
Right, exactly. Any insights into why cycling in particular over, say, other sports?
It's because you can microdose in a very precise way. You've got your heart monitor, you've got your power meter, you can measure things like lactate threshold 1, lactate threshold 2. If people that love data, and who come from a data background, love cycling, because they've got reams of data they can bring into it. Now, this wasn't available when I was racing. We all raced and trained on the field. But for people that like information and data, they've got it all. They can find out what their lactate threshold is, lactate threshold 2. They can create all these zones of training, and then they can dose themselves in a very precise way. So, and that's why cycling is so brilliant, because you can track everything. You can track every single waypoint and information source, heart rate, power. Brilliant.
Well, okay,
Yeah.
so as we're talking about dosing and training intensity, um, as as we age, um, that training mindset we had in our 20s and 30s needs to evolve. So, what are some of the common assumptions you see midlife riders bring in that you have to undo?
Okay. Yeah. So the first book that I wrote, The Midlife Cyclist, a lot of people bought it and maybe thought it was going to be a training manual, although I made it pretty clear that it wasn't a training manual, but it actually wasn't. It was it was almost like I guess, a half of like the philosophy of whether you should versus whether you could. And in that sense, what I was trying to say is we're the first generation in many thousands of generations that want to exercise moderately into middle age and beyond.
Mhm.
So my parents, I mean, I guess the UK is different to the US, but I'll go out on a limb here. My parents didn't want to exercise once they left school. Certainly, my mother might have done some Jane Fonda workout videos, and my dad, but they didn't have any systematized exercise program. We're the first generation, which is brilliant because we're setting a great example for our children. The problem is there's no longitudinal studies and information about what happens when you take a middle-aged body and make it exercise moderately. And as Gerardo says, you can do that spectacularly. I mean, really spectacularly. But the question is, what's the hangover? What's the legacy if you take a middle-aged body and then exercise it? And that the whole book, The Midlife Cyclist, is looking at that as a thought experiment and trying to hold in the front of people's minds, we're pathfinders. We're the first people to do this.
Mhm.
Nobody knows. So we're now holding a torch for every generation behind us, our children and grandchildren included. What comes next if you
Mhm.
try and do this? And that's powerful. And so the book, in a sense, is always coming back to that North Star. We're the first. Some things are known and some things are not known, but we're the first.
Mhm.
And yeah, and it's quantifying how you then approach your training, how you should change your training and your competition if you want to compete, how you should amend that as you get older,
Mhm.
and to make sure you're getting the maximum dividend for your time, exercise, stimulus.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, can I just add something
yeah, go
quick?
ahead,
Because
John.
as I did this, I saw my watch and I remembered one of the things that I learned from Phil's book, which was really great, is at this age, instead of focusing on FTP, for
Mhm.
me, I focus a lot more on HRV. So how well has my body recovered?
Mhm.
Because I can cycle every day, but the question is, how hard do I want to push myself that day? And
Mhm.
if I see that I'm not fully recovered because my HRV is out of range, maybe I'll take it a little easy that day. Maybe I won't cycle that day, go for a walk instead, or focus on resistance training, low intensity things. So
Well,
that is one example.
elaborate for us, because I'm gonna guess there's people on here that don't know what FTP is, and it's not file transfer protocol,
No,
and they don't know maybe even what HRV is and how those are different. So give us a quick explanation.
I'll let Phil answer that. So
Okay. FTP is functional power threshold. And it was something which came out of a book written by Dr. Andrew Coggan in 2006. I mean, he's a serious intellectual, American guy, time trialist. And he wrote this book about how to train with your power meter and came up with this paradigm called functional threshold power, FTP. And it's become a meme in a way. It hit the zeitgeist of the moment. Lots of people coming into cycling. Power meters were invented by a guy called Uli Schoberer, who came out with the SRM. And so he just hit this moment where FTP captured people's imagination. Oh my God, there's a number. I've got a number. I can focus on this number. And so FTP is essentially sustainable power. Now, when I used to race, we had FTP. We just didn't know it was called FTP. If you rode a 10-mile time trial, a 25-mile time trial, and a 50-mile time trial, if you averaged out those three, your average speed, that's your FTP. The problem with FTP is it doesn't correlate to any physiological markers. So it's in a sense, abstract. But it's become such a popular number. It's now used by professional teams, Tour de France teams, and it's used by amateurs. It's used by everybody. So it's like a bit like when, I don't know if it's the same in America, but in Europe, a lot of hotels fold their toilet paper into like a little arrow shape. And it's like the message we're meant to be getting from that is, oh, you care about me because you've folded the toilet paper into an arrow shape. That's the message you're giving me. It's a meme. It doesn't mean anything, but and this is the same thing with FTP. It's become a meme and it's become amazingly popular, and it has value, but it doesn't correlate to physiological markers. So an interesting one, which I think Gerardo is talking about, which I agree with, is something called heart rate variability, which is especially important to midlife athletes. How recovered am I? Now, that's the first question any midlife athlete should ask themselves. If you're not recovered, you shouldn't train. Like you shouldn't train with a cold or flu. One, because it's not very pleasant, but secondly, you get no training benefit. You go out and train when you've got flu or a cold. There's no training benefit. The body's already stressed and you're adding in more stress. It's all bad. So the thing you need to understand is, when should I train? Now, heart rate variability is essentially looking at the variation between the heartbeats. So the heart might be going at 60 beats per minute, but what you want is the maximum variations between the beats. And that's called heart rate variability. And in a sense, that's kind of like your elasticity of fitness. And counterintuitively, more variability is better than less variability. You want that elasticity. And if you get tired and stressed and you're depleted in energy, then your heart rate variability falls. You lost your elasticity. And now, nobody should train in that state, but certainly midlife athletes absolutely shouldn't, because there's no training benefit. You just get more tired and you just get more stressed. So those are the two terms that Gerardo is talking about.
Gotcha. And in terms of HRV, any preferred device? I mean, I've got a Whoop, I've got an Apple Watch. I've got what's your any of them?
I think they're all getting better, Gerardo. You're going to be better on this than I am. You're
Yeah,
way more.
so mine, I measure mine two different ways when I sleep. One is my Garmin watch, and secondly, I use something called the 8 Sleep. It's a pad that goes on top of your mattress. Fantastic. It actually measures your HRV as well.
Oh,
You
wow.
know, what I can do, sometimes they're in line, sometimes they're off, but when they're both low, I definitely know that, and I know why. It's like I either worked out too hard the day before or super hard, which is fine. It just means I need to recover longer. Or I had just taken a red eye and my sleep cycles are all out of whack. I had a glass too many of wine the night before and I didn't sleep so well. All those things impact. And so those are times that I know, like, time to take it a little bit easy the next day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that's a good time to introduce something called allostatic load, Derek and Gerardo. I don't know, but
Yeah.
So allostatic load is looking at a total burden of stress in your body. So and the body has no idea. The body cannot differentiate between training stress, alcohol, or an argument with your loved ones or spouse. So for the body, it's treating all those things the same. It's just stress. So if you have an argument with your loved one or spouse, you have had one too many drinks, like Gerardo said, you've got the red eye, so you're sleep depleted. All these are stress risers, and they like compact like layers of sediment. And so the last thing your body wants, especially if you're midlife, is for you to then add a training stress on that. The body can't differentiate between any of them. It's just stress to be dealt with. And it comes to a certain point and it becomes a tipping point, and you've created too much inflammation into the body. So allostatic load is thinking about that. It's a nice thought experiment to think about, okay, I need to try and reduce the stress in all areas of my life. Stop arguing with people that I don't need to argue with. Make sure if I've got the red eye that I haven't agreed to go out with a load of mates on a hard ride the next day. All these things, which you can do in your 20s because you're immortal, and you can do in your 30s because you can remember being immortal, but you can't do in your 50s. And we get found out in our 50s. That's the point. And that's called allostatic load. And the concept is the body cannot differentiate between the different stress burdens. It can't do that.
So, I love going down the rabbit hole of data and nerding out on this stuff. But at the same time, as I listen to this conversation, for somebody who's maybe just here going, I'm interested in getting back into cycling, this could be really intimidating, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Good
No,
point.
no, and that wasn't a bad thing because I could talk about this for days. I love this stuff.
Yeah.
I've got two
Sorry.
devices on me right now, and I have the 8 sleep, which magical. But the I'll throw this one to Gerardo. I mean, a lot of people here probably don't ride anymore, or they used to ride, but are thinking about getting into it. When someone in midlife that left it a while ago, and they're listening to guys like us going, "Oh my God, this is way over my head," where do they start? What do you tell them?
Well, that old adage, it's just like riding a bike, you never forget. It's true. It's actually scientifically proven because of the way your brain works. So that's the first thing. Like, just get on the bike. The second thing I would say is do some planning so that you get on the bike somewhere where it's safe, a safe route, right? And there's a bunch of ways to quickly research what are safer routes. I hate using the word safe because things can happen, but safer. And so, for example, I was in Sydney a few months back. People were like, "Don't ride a bike there, too dangerous. The people in the Australians, they'll run you over, blah blah blah." So I just sat down and like put my partner at ease that I was going out on a bike. I went on a few apps. I went on Ride with GPS to see
Mhm.
what were the most commonly used cycling routes. I went on Strava to do the same thing. Strava is kind of like a social network for athletes, particularly runners and cyclists. And then I actually went and found the local cycling advocacy group in Sydney. Sometimes it's called a cycling coalition. And on their site, they actually had what roads had protected bike paths.
Mhm.
So using that combination of things, I got on Ride with GPS, designed a route, stuck it on my watch for navigation. I had a fabulous time, was never felt like I was in any type of danger. So that's a really good thing to do. If you want to find your local bicycling coalition, I would highly recommend that you check out a website called bikeleague.org. It's the League of American Bicyclists. You can plug in your city and it'll show you who the local bicycling coalition is. It'll show you cycling clubs, lots of great information. So I highly recommend that. And then one other thing that I tell a lot of people is if you don't want to be on the road because you're afraid of cars, and rightfully so. So one thing that's really taken off is what's called gravel cycling. So gravel routes. So they're basically fire roads in the U.S. GR routes in Europe. But basically they are dirt paths where cars don't go that you can go. A lot of times they're just not technical, so they're not rocky or sandy. So you can ride it with what's called a gravel bike. And a gravel bike is a beautiful mix between a mountain bike and a road bike. And so my gravel bike I love because when I'm in downtown San Francisco, I can cruise through the city pretty quickly and then get on trails on the other side of the bridge, be on dirt trails, and the bike handles beautifully. I wouldn't do anything super rocky. That's what a mountain bike's for. But you're going to have a great time. You're not going to be worrying about cars. And just one other tool for that is there's a website called gravelmap.com. And you'll find a lot of gravel routes on there and ratings for them and so forth. So
Mhm.
those are like really good things to do. And then just quickly, I would say, rent a bike, to rent out different types of bikes to see what you like before you spend a bunch of money on one. To plug Phil's type of industry, get a bike fitting professional to actually measure what types of bikes are going to fit you best so you can narrow down the ones that you want. Another thing is if you're not renting bike, go on a bike tour with like a Backroads or Divine and go with a group of people. They have e-bikes, they have regular bikes. It's a great way to get a feel for it. I have plenty of friends who are not big cyclists who go on those tours and have a fabulous time with their avid cycling partners by using an e-bike.
Mhm.
We do lots of bike tours in Napa Valley. That's one of my favorite routes behind me. In Napa, we also help people find tours as well that we're not guiding, but others people guides. And lastly, there's a nonprofit called Adventure Cycling Association in the US that has lots of great routes on their website. But they also have all kinds of informational content, and they lead tours as well. They tend to be a little bit more less costly, and the crowd is fascinating. So last year I led a tour in the Finger Lakes. The youngest participant was 64, the oldest was 74. And this year I'm leading a route where the oldest participant is 87, and we're riding 400 miles. A lot of it is going to be gravel. So, you're going to find your people out there in these groups. And so these are all great ways to get started.
And I want to actually, and that's amazing. I'm going to address a question from Grace Ann because I think this is a topic I want to dig into. And she said, "How do e-bike riders fit in?" And I, from my perspective, e-bikes. It's funny. I mean, there's a lot of e-bike haters out there, especially on my mountain bike trails at home. But I think e-bikes are a beautiful thing, and I have meat bikes and I have an e-bike. But what I love about the e-bike, first of all, it's a great equalizer. You can take people of different skill sets and different strengths, and we can all go for a ride together. Um, and Damn it, where else was I going to go with this? But yeah, to throw to you guys, e-bikes, where do you
Sure.
guys sit on these?
Phil, I don't know if you own an e-bike, but I own two e-bikes. One that I use in San Francisco. It's actually made to be theft proof, so it's great. And then I have an e-mountain bike that I use in Napa when it's really hot out and I just want to get a quick ride in, but I want to get some distance. So a lot of people ask me about e-bikes. Few recommendations that I have. One is there are different types of e-bikes. There's what's called pedal assist. That's what you want. There's pedal assist with throttle. I'm so on those. And then there's pedal assist class 3 that can go up to 28 miles per hour. I would shy away from those because a lot of dual use trails where there's pedestrians and cyclists, they don't allow them. Because if you hit someone at 28 miles per hour, you're going to probably kill them. So class 1 e-bikes is where I go. My second recommendation is go for the lighter bikes. They're going to cost more, but the data is that when there are cycling injuries, you are twice as likely to have an organ injury, a pelvic injury, end up in the hospital when you're on a heavy e-bike than when you're on a lighter bike. And that's just because of physics. And also when that thing topples on top of you, it's going to hurt. So go for the lighter bikes. There's a class of bikes they basically call them super light models. They weigh between 26 and 40 pounds. Heavy is like anything over 50, I would say 55 pounds. I would stay away from those. Some good brands are like for these super light bikes are like Specialized, Trek, Orbea, and Canyon. And they start, you're going to hate this number, but they start around 5,000 and go up to 15,000. That said, if you're going to be serious about it, I would highly recommend it. You're going to use it more as well because like my e-mountain bike that is actually 50 pounds. So I'm kind of I chose this before I kind of knew all this. I rarely take it with me to places because it's so heavy to put it on my bike rack that I always, end up with like my back hurting after loading it on. So a super light bike, very easy to throw on the back of the cart and get going. And you get a great workout. So, just put it on low, turn it off on the flat stuff. You're going to have a fabulous zone 2 workout. So,
Yeah. And Stephen just said, how do they fit into your fitness routine? I think this is one of the fallacies of e-bikes is they're not exercise. They're as much exercise as you want them to be. Um,
Yes.
and
absolutely.
Well, I'll let you speak to that.
No, I saw the question come up, and from Stephen, I thought it was an extremely good question. I don't make a distinction personally between bikes and e-bikes. I don't. To me, I don't have any. I don't. There's no great divide there for me. I like e-bikes. I like analog bikes. It depends on what mood I'm in, and if I've got if I'm I've got a cold, but I still want to scratch that itch and get some fresh air, it's out on an e-bike. I mean, and I think to your point, Derek, you can train as hard as you want. This fallacy that e-bikes don't make you fit, are you joking? I mean, they really do. And because they're so versatile, you can pick your entry point. Okay, I'm going to have a low power boost, so I'm going to do an awful lot of work here. Or you can have it on I'm not feeling so good, I'm tired, I'm heading home. Everyone's, you can put it on turbo and turbo yourself home. I mean, and I think for midlife athletes, if you're going to start, you maybe want to start with an e-bike. You may also then buy an analog bike, but you'll never throw away the e-bike. The e-bike then becomes your transport of choice for everything. And what a lot of people that when they buy an e-bike find is the car never moves because the e-bike becomes the transport for everything. And I honestly think that e-bikes are, miraculous. I think they're brilliant, and I don't make a distinction at all for my clients or myself between an e-bike and an analog bike. It's a question of what fits the mood and what fits the mission. What's the mission here? And if the mission is I just want to try and go out there for 45 minutes or an hour and get somewhere, but I don't want to pedal hard for one reason or another, it's an e-bike every day of the week. Every day of the week.
Yeah. And
Sorry, Derek, go ahead.
so I was going to say I'm going to use my father as an example. When he turned 70, he came out. I was staying in Whistler. So I always go up there to ride in the summer, and he hadn't been on a bike in a couple decades, and I rented him an e-bike. And he still needs a knee replacement, but his knees weren't great. Um, and that was such an eye opener for him that he and my stepmom went back and both got e-bikes, and now they
Yeah,
ride every day. And when you live in a place like British Columbia, which is not flat at all, it can be super intimidating to get on a bike because no matter what, there's going to be a steep hill to climb. And so it was great to see them embrace this sport again because of e-bikes.
yeah, and the great thing is, you're absolutely right. And if I was cycling in Whistler, by the way, it would be an e-bike. There's no way I would ride anything other than an e-bike in Whistler. Not a chance of it. The days of me having the fitness level to really enjoy Whistler on an analog bike are long, long gone.
Mhm.
Um, but the great thing about an e-bike is, track your heart rate, track in some of them, you can actually track how much power the bike's putting in and how much you're putting in. You can
Mhm.
go and do an hour and a half, 2 hour ride. You can see how much effort you've made. You can see the calories you burn. You can see your heart rate track. It's been a workout. I mean,
Yeah.
but you've given yourself this safety net of and comfort blanket of if it all goes wrong or you feel tired or whatever, the pace gets too hot, you can turn for home or you can turn the boost up. And it's a brilliant, as someone said, I think it was you, Derek, it can create group cohesion amongst a mixed capability group. It really can. Big
Yeah,
fan, big
absolutely.
fan.
Absolutely. And one other thing too is, if you are kind of hesitant because you have like a knee injury or arthritis, or recovering from a surgery, the e-bikes, they do put, when you have them powered on, there's a lot less stress on your knees. So that is a benefit. Obviously, you should probably talk to your doctor because I'm not a doctor, but that that is something to think about. So.
For sure.
Yeah, and I remember talking to an e-bike a company that designed, has e-bikes, a big company, and we were talking about this. And they said, "What more would you want to see in an e-bike?" And I said, "Well, one thing I'd like to see is a bike fitter is like a rehab mode. So you've got a client who needs a knee replacement, or they've got a torn ACL, or they've got some other injury, and all this bike does is gets them across the maximum torque point when they're going to exert most pressure on the injured area, whether that's an ankle or a knee or a hip. All it needs to do is second guess what they're about to do." And we talked at length about that. I don't think they've done it or have any intention of doing it. But even so, e-bikes are brilliant at that. If you've got like a dodgy hip or a knee that's not great, the e-bike is going to take the pressure off that maximum torque loading point for you and
Yeah.
make everything way more comfortable. I mean, you could just turn it off after that if you want to. Once you're going, but even for that, just that moment when you're getting up to speed, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
So, okay, so Phil, you've got a book coming out, The Cycling Addiction, Suffering Speed and the Search for Meaning on Two Wheels. And it kind of looks at how, healthy drive can cross that line into obsession, which my wife would definitely accuse me of being guilty of. So for riders in midlife, when does that ambition start working against health span, which we're ultimately trying to protect? And how do you recognize that line?
I think that's a great way of putting it. I mean, in the first book, I think I talk about lifespan versus health span. Let's go for health span.
Hmm.
I guess it's this book, The Cycling Addiction, it could be codenamed the psychiatry or neurobiology of cycling. It's looking at what's going on in our brains and in our behavior that we probably don't understand. And nobody gets out of this book worse than I do. There's lots of vignettes in the book, but a couple of them are my own, where I do things that are so stupid and are so risky. I'm left scratching my head thinking, what was it? What was it about me that didn't allow me to bail on that mission when it was so obviously failing? And the book isn't all about that, but essentially it's looking about what's going on with the neurobiology of exercise, um, and why we do it and what we get from it and how we can control it and channel it better. And whether you're an amateur or whether you're a Tour de France cyclist. And I interview everybody in between Tour de France winner and recreational cyclist. And the neurobiology is exactly the same. The neurobiology of Tadej Pogacar is no different to the neurobiology of somebody who's just decided to get on their first bike at 50. They're getting the same thing. It just might be that the control mechanisms are a little bit different. So the cycling addiction is just that, really. But it's also meant to be an entertaining read, which just then goes back and interrogates moments in history where people did famously daft things on bikes, and thinking about what was going on in the neurobiology. Some of them are actually tragic,
Yeah.
unfortunately, and some of them are just laughably stupid. And
Hmm.
thinking about what the neurobiology is, and most of the really laughably stupid ones are mine, by the way. Um, and that's what the book is about. It has a serious message and it has a serious undertone. But rather than talking in the first book, I was talking to sports doctors and cardiologists. In this book, it's psychiatrists and psychologists and neurobiologists, and many of them American actually. And Americans are doing fantastic work in this field. Fantastic work actually. And they were kind enough to share their thoughts with me. And the book that I sort of started with, I don't know if either of you or any of you have read Tim Crabb's The Rider. There's a book called by a Dutch guy called Tim Crabb, who's a screenwriter essentially, but he wrote this book called The Rider in 1978. And I reread this book a few years ago and thought, he's thinking about the same things I'm thinking about. And essentially, The Rider is a day in the life of this racer who does this race in the Alps in France. And you're just seeing this kind of point of vision, first person narrative of everything he's thinking, all the stupid things he's thinking. And when you race a bike, you do think some really stupid things. The stream of consciousness is beyond bizarre. And he just shares it all and lays it out. And I approached Tim Crabb and said, like, I want to ask you some questions. He doesn't really talk. He's quite old now. He's very hard to get hold of. And like a great big carp, he surfaced to the surface of this pond. And I was like, oh my God, it's Tim Crabb. And I asked him a few questions, and then he answered the questions. And then the giant carp melted below the surface. I'm like, Tim, I've got a couple more questions. Gone, gone. The giant carp went to the bottom of the pool, never to be seen again. But I was so lucky, because what I was thinking about and what I was talking about is what he was talking about in The Rider. And in a sense, I'm asking the same questions, but I'm 30, 40 years on, and the science has caught up now and can answer those questions. So I don't refer to Tim that much in the book, a little bit, but essentially I'm after the same things. What is going through our heads? We're getting so much. We're so stimulated and in love with this thing, and
Hmm.
yet sometimes it hurts us. And as we talked earlier, I'm sitting here having just been injured 2 weeks ago from loving this bloody thing too much. So that's the cycling addiction, yeah, in a sense.
And it's funny. I totally relate to that. My wife would call it an addiction. You just have to go into my garage to validate her her belief.
She's
Um,
right, Derek. She's right.
It is, and I've never understood why. And in fact, there's something interesting going on. So I was diagnosed as having ADD in my early 20s. And it wasn't until probably sometimes in my late 30s, I read an article on how people with ADD and ADHD are commonly drawn to cycling as their sport. I don't know
Well,
why. I
there's a whole chapter on this book on this very subject. I mean, and I
oh,
break it down. Yeah. There's a huge chapter on this book where I just talk about absolutely, is it neurodiverse people find the bike, what's the relationship here?
sure.
And you're absolutely right. And I'm one of your tribe, Derek. So no,
That's
no, you don't need to be a psychiatrist to work that one out. Um,
yeah.
but uh, uh, um, and there's a chapter, and that's why I feel comfortable talking about it in this book, because
Mm,
I'm not, I'm talking as part of the tribe, and
mm,
there's something about this. Obviously, cycling just doesn't appeal to people who are neurodiverse,
sure.
but my God, it really does something for us. It
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
it captures us and captivates us and calms us
Yes.
and channels us, and it's not just people with ADD, people with autism the same. And
Yeah.
in the book, I create this spectrum between what were called killer winners and flow seekers. And when I
Hmm.
used and thinking about this killer winners and flow seekers spectrum in racing, when you're in a road race bunch, you've got the killer winners and you've got the flow seekers and the people in between. And the flow seekers, they don't want to hurt anybody. They just want to hurt themselves. All they want to do is hurt themselves. Whereas the killer winners may want to hurt themselves, but they also really want to hurt other people.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so thinking about what this spectrum is, and then with this spectrum, I then interrogate some of the vignettes from cycling, some of the great moments in cycling history, and think about, oh yeah, you're a killer winner, aren't you? You can't stop hurting people, and then
Mhm.
you've got the people who are the flow seekers. They just want to hurt themselves, and they're happy to push themselves into all kinds of trouble because that's what they like, that's what they get. And I look at the neurobiology of that, what's actually going on. Yeah, we've done quite deep now. We've got sorry,
We
but
have, and I'm so looking forward to this book because it's going to explain so many of the whys I've had of why I've been attracted to this sport in such in what would be described as an obsessed way.
Derek, this book was written for you, um,
Thank you, thank you.
and only you, really.
Well, I appreciate that. I'll share it with other people, but
Okay, fine. That's
yeah.
up to you, isn't it? But it's really for you.
I'm going to give it to my wife so she understands what's going on here, and why our garage is full of bikes.
I
You know,
can help.
we've only got a few minutes left. One of the things I'd love to do here, actually, if we could, is just open it up to questions from the audience. And so, if you have any questions, by all means, hit the little raise hand button, and unmute yourself. And happy to throw to you. And yeah, questions for Phil or Gerardo, by all means, ask away. And oh, we got our first one. Bruce, fire away.
Hey, so I'm in my late 50s and I've got to unplug something because it's loud in here. I'm in my late 50s and I just had a total knee replacement about 5 months ago, 6 months ago, and dealing with kind of the aftermath of that because I had to have a revision following that a few weeks ago. Um, any advice or general thoughts from anyone in the audience or Phil regarding coming back from a significant, I'll call it an injury. It's not really an injury in the truest sense of the word, but I'm treating myself as though I'm injured right now. Sticking with physical therapy, and I know not to overdo it and jump back on too soon because that backfires. But any thoughts or experience on that? Thanks.
Shall I take that one?
Sure, go for it.
So put my bike fitter's hat on, Bruce. Can I just ask you a question? How long are you post surgery?
Right now, I'm just 2.5 weeks, so I've got a long way to go before I can really have the range of motion necessary for my upright bike. I'm about
And, how,
I've got about
and
20
how's the
degrees.
swelling? How's the
Swelling's not
swelling?
bad. The swelling. It comes and goes as swelling has its own agenda. Um, but and I am working with a physical therapist who's really very much sports and performance oriented after this revision. So I'm excited about that and about what he offers. So yeah.
Okay, yeah. So here's my thoughts on that. I've worked with countless people with knee replacements. The good news is you're almost certainly going to make a full return to cycling. There's no reason not to. I don't think I've ever worked with anybody who's had a knee replacement that hasn't got back to full cycling. The bad news is, which you already know, it's a very painful process. The first couple of weeks are awful. The first week is is the worst. Yeah. So you're beyond the, it's all good now, and the plateau out of knee replacement is, you're going to get a lot better a lot quicker now. So here's my tips for you before we're out of time. Short cranks, go to a 160 crank, and then get the handlebars up high. Control the the maximum knee angle and the maximum hip angle. So the hip angle and the knee angle need to be controlled, and your PT can help you with that. But you go to a really good bike fitter and say, listen, I've had a knee replacement. I've been told I need to control knee and hip angle. If you control knee and hip angle and also get the stance width wider, get your feet out wider. So maybe when you start back, maybe just put some flat pedals on and don't clip in, because there's going to be some dysfunction there. There's going to be some learned motor patterning issues with the way you pedal. The way around that is to start with flat pedals, have your feet out a little bit wider, shorter cranks. Give yourself every chance to recover properly, but you should be fine. I've never worked with a knee replacement client who couldn't come back to full functional use, Bruce, but I wish you luck, because you're kind of in the hinterland right now. This first couple of weeks is tough.
Yep. So if I
But
just to recap real quick, so shorten the cranks as much as possible down to 160, open up the hip angle, raise the handlebar up as much as I can within the limits of what I've got.
Space the feet. Get some flat pedals on.
Yep. Space. Yep. Great.
Yeah. Even if you're not on a turbo trainer, even if you're not on a stationary trainer, you just get some flat pedals on. It'll give you a nicer feeling to start with. Feeling clipped in will feel awful to start with. Flat pedals, trainers, short cranks. Just start pedaling. Get that body moving, and it'll feel great. You'll really enjoy that movement. You'll be scratching that itch. It's like, oh God, it'll feel lovely to you. I feel your pain, brother. No, yeah. I mean, listen to your PT. They'll get and say, look, I'm a cyclist. I need to get back to cycling. That's what I do. And make sure they get you back on that bike ASAP. But I feel your pain. It's the first couple of weeks are tough.
Yep. And he's a cyclist too, so he understands.
Yeah, great. You'll be fine. Well, if he's a cyclist or she's a cyclist, they'll have a thing called a goniometer, and they can measure knee and hip angles. So ask them to put the bike on the trainer and measure your knee and hip angles. And keep them open, and that will help your rehab.
Brilliant. Thanks, Phil.
Love that. We've only got 2 minutes left here, but I'm going to answer this one thing from Stephen Gordon for Derek. Has MEA considered a way to incorporate bicycling into some of its programs? And I'm just going to be totally candid with you guys. This is one of the reasons I'm doing this. And when Gerardo brought this idea, that was one of our intentions. And, I would love to survey this group. If MEA were to do some sort of a cycling weekend where we brought people to Santa Fe. And I mean, there's so much beautiful riding out there, and, potentially convince Phil to fly over and bring Gerardo in. Would that be something that you'd be interested in? And if that is something of interest, give me a thumbs up in the chat there as I figure out what we're going to do. I got a 2 thumbs up from I'm getting lots of thumbs up. Okay. This is something that we are considering doing, and I would love to put some weekends together where everybody comes out and we do exactly that, and we get to live what we're actually talking about here. And I mean, my experience has been I've never met cyclists I don't like. We're all cut from the same cloth, and it's a great community. And as you guys know, community is so important for what MEA is doing. So on that note, as we wrap this up, Gerardo, Phil, thank you. Thank you for being here. And Gerardo, thank you for pulling this together, bringing this idea. Phil, thank you for making the time. Thank you for writing a book for me. I appreciate that. I look forward to reading it.
You're welcome. Thank you, Gerardo. Thank you, Derek. Thank you, everybody else.
Brilliant. Yes. Thank you very much. Fantastic. Fantastic.
Have a great day,
Great info.
everybody.